What if the fate of Ukraine's war rested not on a single dramatic battle, but on the slow, relentless grip of winter? Imagine a conflict where the true front line lies not amid thunderous artillery barrages, but beneath the snow, within the fragile pipes, battered power stations, and silent gas fields that keep a nation breathing. This winter, Ukraine teeters on a historic edge, and the world may be more vulnerable than it realizes. The war's outcome could be determined not by a sudden breakthrough, but by a drawn-out struggle with cold, scarcity, and the destruction of invisible lifelines. Recent revelations are staggering. Nearly two-thirds of Ukraine's ability to extract gas has been eliminated by Russian missile barrages. This is not merely a setback on paper. It is a calculated strike on Ukraine's ability to stay warm, to keep industry moving, and to give hope to civilians as the cold tightens its grip. For the first time, the threat is existential, not from advancing armored divisions, but from the slow suffocation of daily life. Imagine a family in Kharkiv, waking up to a home with no heat, the windows frosted from within, wondering how long they can endure. Multiply this by millions, and you begin to see the scale of the crisis. Moscow claims it seeks peace and dialogue. Yet its deliberate targeting of gas fields and electricity grids tells a darker truth. This new offensive is not just against soldiers, but against the very systems that allow a country to function. It is economic, psychological, and political warfare rolled into one, designed to grind Ukraine down until negotiation is no longer a choice, but a necessity for survival. The message is clear: surrender warmth and power, or surrender autonomy. This sudden escalation forces us to confront a chilling reality. Has the war entered a phase where energy, not arms, will decide the outcome? If we do not grasp the true stakes of energy warfare, we risk missing how modern conflicts are fought and how they are lost. The battle is no longer just about territory, but about the invisible veins of a nation's survival. This kind of war blurs the boundaries between military and civilian, making every citizen a participant and every household a target. Let's step back. Why does gas infrastructure hold such power? And how did Ukraine's energy lifeline become the new front line of the war? To answer this, we must understand the historical, economic, and strategic context in which Ukraine's gas systems were built, and how they became so vulnerable. To understand why these energy strikes are so devastating, we need to look at Ukraine's unique dependence on gas. How did a nation once rich in resources become so exposed to this kind of attack? In the decades following its independence, Ukraine inherited a vast network of gas fields and pipelines from the Soviet era. For years, this network was both a blessing and a curse. It provided energy security, but its maintenance was expensive, and its location, often in the east, made it a tempting target. Energy is more than just a resource. It is the pulse that keeps a nation alive, especially in times of war. In Ukraine, gas infrastructure once quietly powered factories, warmed homes, and sustained daily life, even as fighting rumbled in the distance. Now, that invisible force is being torn apart in broad daylight. Think of a steel plant in Dnipro, powered by gas from Poltava, producing the beams that rebuild bombed bridges. If that gas stops, the plant falls silent, and reconstruction grinds to a halt. Attacking energy systems is an old tactic, but what began on the night of October 3rd marks a new and chilling phase. Reports say about 3/5 of Ukraine's gas extraction capacity has been wiped out. This is not only about disabling military targets, it is a systematic attack on the civilian backbone of the country, threatening everything from industry to ordinary survival. The echoes of history are unmistakable. During World War II, the bombing of oil fields in Ploiești crippled the Nazi war machine. Today, the aim is to cripple an entire society's ability to function. These strikes do not stop at the front lines. Pipelines, processing plants, even the electric grid linking towns and cities have all been targeted. With each hit, the risk rises. Entire cities could go dark, production could grind to a halt, and millions may face winter without heat or light. The countdown to crisis accelerates as the cold season approaches. Historical parallels abound. During the siege of Leningrad, it was not just bombs that killed, but hunger and cold as supply lines failed. In Ukraine, the fear is that history could repeat itself in a modern guise. Losing gas is more than an economic shock. If the grid collapses, homes freeze, hospitals go dark, and society itself teeters on the edge. Every new explosion is a warning that Ukraine's struggle is not just on the battlefield, but in the fight to keep daily life from unraveling. The threat is clear: not only military defeat, but a humanitarian disaster that could bring the nation to its breaking point. Imagine a maternity ward in Kyiv, suddenly plunged into darkness during a power outage, where doctors must rely on flashlights and blankets to keep newborns alive. This is the new front of the war, a battle fought with missiles and with the levers of energy that sustain an entire country. The outcome will decide not just the fate of Ukraine's economy, but the survival of its society. If energy flows are not restored, the consequences could ripple out for generations. But behind the shattered infrastructure lies a deeper strategy, a campaign designed to break not just machines, but the will of a nation. To understand what's truly at stake, we need to look at the broader ambitions driving this assault. What if bombs and drones are only half the weapon? In this war, the real struggle is being waged deep inside Ukraine's energy grid, where each strike sends shockwaves far beyond the immediate blast. Russia's strategy is brutally effective: force Ukraine to the bargaining table by making continued resistance unbearably costly. Every battered gas plant or shattered pipeline is not just a military target, it is psychological warfare, designed to erode public trust in Kyiv's ability to govern and protect its people. The chilling effect is cumulative. When the lights go out in Lviv, the whole nation feels its vulnerability. Roughly 60% of Ukraine's gas extraction infrastructure now lies in ruins or has been disabled. This is not just a matter of lost energy. It means lost heat, lost light, stalled industry. Factories grind to a halt, cities are plunged into darkness, and families brace for winter with shrinking supplies and mounting fear. In the east, towns like Izium and Severodonetsk, already battered by shelling, now face the prospect of a winter without energy or hope. Each blackout sows new seeds of doubt. As the nights grow longer and outages stretch on, ordinary Ukrainians are forced to ask themselves, can their government keep the country afloat, or is it time to consider a bitter compromise? The psychological impact cannot be understated. During the London Blitz, the British government feared that blackouts would cause not just fear, but chaos. In Ukraine, a similar anxiety now grips the population. Official statements project calm and control. But behind the cameras, frontline commanders and trusted sources describe mounting exhaustion, growing resource shortages, and a sense of anxiety that is spreading through both military ranks and civilian life. The tension is unmistakable as everyone waits for the next strike to land. Social media posts reveal citizens crowding into points of invincibility, public shelters with generators and heat, hoping to outlast the next blackout. Even Ukraine's latest weapons, like the much-touted Flamingo missile, have become a source of disillusionment. Once celebrated, the missile was quickly revealed as a rebranded Western import, easily intercepted by Russian air defenses. Instead of lifting spirits, its failure has deepened skepticism at home and among Western allies. In a digital age, every failed defense becomes a viral moment, amplifying doubt and despair. Every destroyed power station, every failed weapon, every city plunged into darkness ratchets up the pressure, militarily, psychologically, and politically. The real danger is becoming clear. Morale is beginning to crack. If public confidence in Kyiv shatters, the war could be lost not by force of arms, but from within. History offers sobering lessons. In the final days of the Vietnam War, it was not battlefield losses, but the erosion of will and credibility that led to collapse. If this campaign succeeds, the consequences will be profound. the answer could determine the fate of Ukraine and redraw the lines of this conflict entirely. The world watches not just for military victories, but for signs of resilience or breakdown in the face of sustained energy warfare. But what does this relentless campaign actually look like on the ground? To understand, we need to follow the impact of a single strike, from the moment the sirens sound to the long, cold aftermath. Picture a missile screaming out of the night sky, striking a gas processing plant near Poltava. Within seconds, the blast echoes across the city. Emergency crews scramble to contain fires, but the damage is done. Half the region loses heat and electricity. Schools send children home, factories shut down, and families huddle in darkness, waiting for updates that may never come. Could the fate of this war be sealed not in trenches, but in boardrooms and blackout cities? As Russia escalates its campaign, new strikes have now destroyed close to 2/3 of Ukraine's gas extraction network. The front lines have shifted dramatically. Now, the survival of Ukraine depends not just on soldiers, but on the fragile arteries of energy that keep the nation alive. In a sense, the war has moved from the battlefield to the boiler room. A shattered energy grid means more than cold apartments and darkened streets. When the gas stops flowing, factories and arms plants go silent. Trains stall, supply trucks are stranded, and war production grinds to a halt. Without power, even the most determined army risks paralysis, and the fabric of civil order begins to unravel. In Bakhmut, where fighting was once the main threat, now the lack of electricity and heating poses an equally grave danger. For ordinary Ukrainians, the threat of a winter without heat is terrifying. If homes freeze and businesses close, families may have no choice but to flee westward, sparking a fresh refugee crisis across Europe. That humanitarian emergency could ignite unrest within Ukraine or erode the will of Western allies as their citizens grow weary of rising costs and hardship. The echoes of the Syrian refugee crisis, which reshaped politics across the continent, are not lost on European leaders. Meanwhile, Ukraine's lifelines face relentless attack. Precision missiles have battered ports and key transport hubs, turning every Western arms shipment into a perilous gamble. In Washington and Brussels, doubts simmer. Can Ukraine withstand a campaign where every delivery route burns and every port could be the next target? The risks extend beyond weapons. Humanitarian aid, medical supplies, and even food shipments now require armed escorts and contingency plans. Moscow now adopts a new posture, projecting itself as a firm but reasonable negotiator. The Kremlin's plan is to squeeze Ukraine through energy warfare, then offer talks from a position of strength. By portraying itself as open to peace, Russia seeks to sway both international opinion and exhausted Ukrainians facing another long, dark winter. In this narrative, every missile strike is framed not as aggression, but as leverage for dialogue. In Western capitals, the mood is shifting. Headlines once filled with tales of Ukrainian courage now dwell on setbacks, corruption, and the mounting burdens of an endless conflict. Fatigue is spreading, not only among leaders, but among ordinary people who must weigh costly energy bills and economic uncertainty against the distant promise of freedom. Polls in Germany and France show declining support for costly aid packages. In the United States, election year politics threaten to stall new assistance. Yet the shockwaves reach far beyond Ukraine. If energy warfare can bring a country to its knees, it may redefine how wars are fought in this century. Security guarantees, alliances, and the rules of war themselves are suddenly in question. What unfolds in Ukraine could become the template for future conflicts, where pipelines and power plants matter as much as tanks and treaties. In a world increasingly dependent on complex networks, every nation becomes vulnerable to invisible attacks. In this new era of hybrid war, what can Ukraine, or any nation, do to endure, adapt, and survive? The lessons are urgent, and they extend far beyond the current headlines. But this battle over energy is not just a test of Ukraine's resilience. It is a signal to the world. The rules of modern warfare are changing, and the stakes have never been higher. How do you defend a country when the enemy's main target is your ability to survive, not just your ability to fight? This is not a new dilemma. During the Kosovo War, NATO bombed Serbia's electrical grid to force a surrender. The difference now is the scale and duration of the attacks, and the vulnerability of civilian populations. Ukraine's crisis makes this brutally clear. In today's wars, it is not only tanks and trenches that matter. When adversaries destroy gas plants, power grids, and water systems, the true battlefront becomes daily life. This spring, Russia destroyed nearly 2/3 of Ukraine's gas extraction capacity in a matter of weeks. Suddenly, the question is not just about holding territory, it is about keeping millions warm and alive through winter. The stakes are not abstract, they are measured in degrees Celsius, in hours of blackout, in hospital admissions, and in the number of families forced to flee. This is energy warfare. The aim is to break the nation's will by plunging families into darkness and cold. Ukraine's experience warns us. Modern conflict shatters the old rules. The battlefield is everywhere, and survival depends on the resilience of infrastructure as much as the bravery of soldiers. Imagine facing months without reliable electricity, heating, or even clean water. In such conditions, the collapse of morale becomes a weapon as dangerous as any missile. In Grozny, in the 1990s, similar tactics left civilians to choose between leaving their homes or risking death from exposure and disease. Hybrid war targets the fabric of society. Stockpiling weapons is no longer enough. Every country must now prepare backup power systems, alternative supply routes, and rapid response teams for repairs. The defenders with the most flexible and redundant networks, who can improvise under pressure, stand the best chance of enduring. During the 2006 Israel-Lebanon conflict, Israeli infrastructure teams worked around the clock to restore power after Hezbollah rocket strikes, often within hours, a testament to the importance of preparation. But even the strongest grid is useless if society itself fractures. When blackouts drag on and factories shut down, trust in leaders becomes the real line of defense. If the public loses faith that government can keep them safe and informed, panic spreads faster than any sabotage. Wars can be lost in darkness, long before territory falls. In Venezuela, repeated blackouts in recent years have led to the collapse of critical services and widespread unrest, even in the absence of war. Information is now a weapon. Russia's campaign does not just demolish infrastructure, it aims to break Ukraine's will and undermine alliances abroad. Images of wrecked power stations or headlines about faltering defenses become tools to stoke fear, division, and doubt. In this war, the perception of unity and hope is as vital as any anti-missile shield. During the Cold War, propaganda was used to sow discord behind enemy lines. Today, social media accelerates the process, making societies more vulnerable to psychological operations. Support from Ukraine's allies has been immense, but it is not limitless. Western patience, resources, and attention can all fade. This means local ingenuity, like neighborhood generators, crowdsourced repairs, and underground supply chains, often tips the scales. Adaptability and morale decide whether a society weathers the storm or falls apart. In Britain during the Second World War, make do and mend campaigns encouraged citizens to improvise solutions, reinforcing national resilience. For ordinary people, the lesson is stark but empowering. Survival depends not just on stockpiling food or water, but on community spirit and psychological readiness. Supporting your neighbors, sharing verified information, and refusing to let panic dictate your actions. These are now acts of resistance. When every household is a potential target, unity and resilience become the ultimate shields. In Ukraine, neighborhood groups organize to clear snow, distribute supplies, and check on the elderly, small acts that, cumulatively, sustain the nation. The stakes could not be higher. If we do not learn from Ukraine's ordeal, our own societies may be just as exposed. Critical infrastructure can be attacked anywhere. Propaganda can fracture any community. Physical and social resilience will decide which nations endure and which collapse. In the United States, Cyber attacks on pipelines and water systems have already provided a glimpse of vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a future conflict. So as the next winter looms, what is the one lesson we must all take to heart? Ukraine's response is not just about survival, it is reshaping how countries everywhere must prepare for conflict. What are the new rules for defending a nation when every home and power line is a front line? The next major war may not be won with tanks and troops, but with switches, pipelines, and the resilience of ordinary people. In Ukraine, recent Russian attacks have destroyed roughly 3/5 of the country's natural gas extraction infrastructure. This is not only a military statistic. It is a direct strike at the systems that warm homes, power hospitals, and keep factories running through brutal winters. This campaign signals a new era, shifting the battlefield from what we can see to what we cannot. The weapons now include blackouts, bitter cold, and economic collapse. The goal is not just to defeat an army, but to undermine hope itself, making daily survival seem impossible. In this kind of war, the unity and patience of civilians are as vital as any weapon. By targeting Ukraine's energy grid, Russia is escalating the conflict far beyond the trenches. Destroyed pipelines and shattered power plants are meant to break the will of a nation, forcing leaders to negotiate from a position of desperation. This winter, the real struggle may be less about territory, and more about whether communities can endure when the heat fades and the lights vanish. The battle lines are now drawn through every city block, every apartment complex, every school and hospital. For Ukraine, the stakes could not be higher. If the energy crisis deepens, industries will shutter, hospitals may go dark, and millions could face freezing nights with no relief. When basic survival is threatened, the true strength of a nation is revealed. This is a type of warfare that rarely makes headlines, yet it can determine the outcome as decisively as any tank battle. The resilience of the Ukrainian people, their ability to adapt and persevere, will be tested as never before. But Ukraine's ordeal is also a warning. Across the globe, every society relies on fragile networks, grids, pipelines, wires, and servers. Modern conflict is no longer limited to soldiers in uniform. It is a test of infrastructure, adaptability, and the collective will to withstand attacks that seek to paralyze rather than destroy. The world must take heed. The silent battles for energy, information, and public resolve could shape the security of every nation. Ignore these lessons, and the next war may reach your doorstep far sooner than expected. The silent battles for energy, information, and public resolve could shape the security of every nation. As Ukraine faces another winter of darkness, the question for all of us is clear. Are we truly ready for the wars of tomorrow, not just on distant fields, but within our own homes and communities? The answer will be written not in headlines, but in the resilience of our societies and the strength of our collective will.